let's talk about what we were just talking about with Mark, which is the Guantanamo Bay, Gitmo, as they call it.
Yeah,
There's new tents going up. Satellite images show that there's changes going on. We know that there's scuttlebutt about deporting undocumented immigrants from America and housing them at Guantanamo Bay. It's I don't know, concerning is a light word for what's happening there.
yeah.
Is this really going to happen? Is this a reality?
I mean, the answer to that rhetorical question continues, whatever the question is, to be yes. So it's not a coincidence that tents are going up. There are, I think as of January, there were 30 people being held at Guantanamo, and many of them without even having been officially charged. The closure of Guantanamo, which, as Mark pointed out, was an executive order issued by President Obama, was never followed up on because the support for keeping it open was bipartisan. So when it went to Congress, when it came time, because an executive order has a sort of a shelf life, that Congress has to vote on some of this stuff, and the effort to keep it open was bipartisan. Even this year, earlier this year, there was a push by people, a group, and I don't recall their name, but something against torture. So you can imagine what kind of group they are. It's an advocacy group, and they were trying to put pressure on President Biden to close Guantanamo. Now we see Guantanamo being used in whether it's the effort to halt immigration, to take what they term as illegal people in this United States and put them someplace else, transfer them. Guantanamo always seems to be the place. And now it's almost lore, right? It's not just that it's a place where they detain people. Guantanamo is part of the lexicon of punishment in America. And the people that are at their most extreme, that want to punish immigrants, to them that sort of equates the worst immigrants, however they can be defined. Some of them very easily, some of them as criminals, would go there, one would presume. But again, there's no plan. It seems to be flying by the seat of his pants, and that's what we're living with now. So those tents, I wouldn't be fooled into thinking they're for a Boy Scout camp jamboree.
No, definitely not. But
Yeah.
speaking of undocumented people and the roundups that are happening, the story is this morning that Tom Homan, who's in charge of all of this, says it's not a game. That his comments come after this immigration raid in a Denver suburb was leaked, and he says it allowed targets in a gang to escape. There there's a growing, and Mark was just mentioning this a few minutes ago with KCBS in San Francisco. There's this growing sense that the media shouldn't cover so closely these immigration raids, shouldn't say where they're happening, shouldn't say, that there's unmarked vehicles being used, shouldn't say all of these things because it somehow gets in the middle of the raid and puts the ICE agents at risk. I guess it's a big super secret that this is all going down.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the thing. Do you tell the people when you are going to be doing the action you're going to be doing or not?
Mhm.
By telling them, I mean, I hope they keep announcing it and saying it to give people a chance to not be there when they come. But by the same token, they need the media to show this. So if it happens in a surreptitious way, the aftermath is never as good as the math, as it were.
Well, now the FCC is investigating stations like KCBS for apparently giving too much information. So
Right.
they're in danger of having broadcast licenses pulled because they've run afoul of the Trump administration and their, immigrant sweep up.
Yeah, and none of this is funny or light or just a video you scroll up to the next video for. This kind of stuff is serious, and there is precedent for it. There's precedent in many people's lifetimes who live and breathe among us today. Many people in other countries who have this as we walk today, and there's not precedent for it in the U.S. in this way. What is going on in America right now has no precedent. And it's consistent that they're going after the media. They're going after the people who supply the information that they don't want shared. It's not a surprise that they have their own media through which they do a lot of their sharing. This is almost covert. It is undermining the U.S. Constitution, and it is really serious. Now, what do you do about that, right? You keep telling the story, unfortunately. None of us like listening to it. None of us like hearing it. A lot of people like to close their eyes and wish it would go away, but it's real. And my confidence in it is that it will not endure in the way that that nothing that Trump does endures. That said, don't go with confidence. Go with what already exists and what we know, and react to it in very, very serious ways. That's why the media has to be even tougher now than they have been in the past, especially when things haven't seemed to matter. If what the media reported mattered, then Trump would not have won re-election and may not have survived impeachments. So, but we have to make sure that the people for whom news matters and reporting matters are getting that news and reporting and doing it and sharing it themselves.
I think we have video of this next thing I want to show you because it really freaked me out. I have to say, I've been thinking about where the line in the sand is about when people might start to leave America, when I might feel like this country is not what it was and that maybe people are in danger. Maybe I'm in danger for, speaking out and being on a broadcast platform. And where is that line in the sand? And this video really freaked me out. I don't know if you've seen it today, but there were nearly 100 Democratic members of Congress that went to the Department of Education to meet with officials there and talk about what was happening. And they're at an all access entrance and they're denied entry into the building. And there's this seeming, can we get the sound, Albert? There's this seeming security guard who is physically preventing them from entering in the building. Check it out.
I've sent the assistant secretary a letter alerting her that we would be here today, and we've asked her for a meeting.
Yeah, I don't know that that's been accepted, so until that's accepted.
Wait a minute.
What do you do here?
What do you do here?
Security responsibility.
Get out of the way. We pay for your job. We pay you.
We're members of
We pay
Congress.
you.
We are here
Nobody has accepted a meeting.
members of Congress.
You are.
This goes on and on and on, and this guy doesn't back down. He is not letting them in. He says you have to be escorted into this building. You have to let us know that you're coming well in advance. This is, I guess, a new rule. He won't show them his identification, and he's preventing members of Congress from entering the Department of Education.
Right, and he will be lauded as a hero on one side, and by people who just reflexively laud people who are keeping Democrats away from anything. So that's Mark Takano. You see Maxwell Frost in the background there. Mark Takano is the one speaking with him. He's a representative from sort of the Riverside area of Southern California, and that is what they're trying to do. And it is. I don't think it's too much to say that these are sort of almost Gestapo-like tactics. I know you're supposed to.
That's why it scared me so much.
Yeah,
They've taken full-on control of a federal building. They won't let elected members of Congress into the building. This might be a line in the sand for somebody. It approaches the line for me. This is very scary.
Yeah, no, it's scary when members of Congress who are, I mean, in the sort of the literal way of what they do, they represent us in Congress in Washington. They are the ones, even though they represent most of them, about 750,000 or so people at least. Most of them are there because we sent them there, and it's not like they're thinking about me, but they're thinking about the job they need to do, and that is to gain access to the Department of Education, which has been whispered about, and actually not just whispered anymore, in amplified voice. They're questioning on the other side the need for that department, and is it the next one to go? It is really a departure from the norm, at the Department of Education of all places to keep members of Congress out. Education, which at its core is about kids and learning and teachers. It's an amazing thing.
Wild. I wanted to run this by you because we've seen the federal websites, many of them scrubbed of information. Yesterday, I was reading that if you type in the word abortion at the one of the health websites, there's a prompt that comes up saying search for adoption. Oh, really?
Right. Yeah.
In other cases, the words climate change have been scrubbed. And so we're getting this lack of information. And at the same time, I saw this story. This came out of The Guardian. And it's a story about FEMA workers who are in Los Angeles responding to the wildfires, reportedly being told to say the word alien instead of immigrant.
Yeah.
And I think it's all part of their message. You know, they want federal workers to adopt the way that they want things said. They want to control the message on the federal websites. And if you control the message, then you're really that's power. That's, kind of controlling what we think and how we say it and how we approach everything.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, what they're good at, and what you have to give them credit for, because you have to learn how to beat it, is they're good at taking that message and having it resonate with the people they want to resonate with. So when they say alien, or they even say illegal, right? They are doing it with a purpose, and that is to generate the hatred of these people. That is what got them elected in many cases. So I think that, I mean, it doesn't take a genius, and I'm certainly not pretending to be that, but I think that there is a real political value to doing that, and to getting people to say, yeah, of course, they're aliens, they're illegal aliens, and go back to that again.
Yeah.
And it serves their purpose, but it has to be fought, right? And it doesn't have to be fought in the moment, but there has to be a plan. And again, we're just a few weeks into an administration where even as citizens, we're trying to figure out how to deal with what's going on in Washington right now. So I think elected officials, the opposition is entitled to a little time to plan. The attack is on all fronts, and it takes a lot to do that. I think, we had Pam Harwitz on this show a little while ago, and she said, don't agonize, organize. Well, it takes a second to organize. And I think that there has to be that organization. I think they know it too. I think the pressure on Democrats right now is enormous. I was with two members of Congress in Los Angeles last week that were out here for a conference on artificial intelligence. And I talked to some of them, and they said the hardest thing we have to do right now is convince people that we are taking this very seriously, without doing action immediately. First of all, they are in the minority in both houses of Congress. These are executive orders. The courts are doing their job very well at the lower court level, and we'll see what happens when it gets to higher courts. But they said, we are focused on dealing with this because we lose, and we lose our jobs, and we lose our country if we don't take this seriously. But so I think that they're working on figuring all of this out, which is cold comfort to a lot of people. But it has only been a couple of weeks, and I think that any kind of unified opposition to this, rather than in haphazard ways, is best done in an organized way.
Speaking of people losing their jobs, this whole federal buyout situation, we've got a judge now delaying the buyout offers that they've been making to federal employees, ordering the deadline for workers to make their decision on this deferred resignation situation to at least Monday now. The original deadline was end of day Thursday, and the thinking is that this pause allows arguments over the offer at a hearing set for next week. But meanwhile, as Mark was mentioning earlier, it's chaos, and you have the higher ups in these agencies being pressured to send out these messages that are threatening employees, telling them they'll be replaced by AI, they're going to have nothing, they take the money now and get out. It's scary for people. Their livelihoods are being threatened. Meanwhile, they don't know if the offer is even legit because it might be illegal. And so if you sign up for the offer, are you really going to get the money? And
Right.
Musk has already said that he's pushing back against the retirement benefits negotiated for federal workers. So if you think you're going to get your pension, and then you take the deferred resignation, and not only do you not get 8 months of money, but then you don't get your pension either, you're really screwed. So people are having a really rough time knowing what the right move is here.
Exactly, and it does go back. I mean, it harkens back to an era that we mentioned before in fascism and Nazi Germany, and the just following orders thing. You know, I was just following orders. And what's interesting is the people at the FBI who were involved in January 6th, reportedly, who were just following orders, to use that turn of phrase, they're the ones that are being retained. They said that even the Trump people are saying you don't have to worry about it if you were just following orders. So the people that were just following orders are getting a reprieve in what is also a sort of subtle callback to a horrible time. I should also say, you know, when I was talking to you before, Kim, about what these members of Congress told me, it's not just, I mean, this isn't going to be won just by Democrats. It's going to be in an appeal to whatever better angels they can find among their Republican colleagues and Republican rank and file. It does become easier, not yet, and I would never have predicted that it would yet, but it does become easier to work with a lame duck president in terms of getting people to oppose that person, because these are the people that are going to have a political future when he does not. And it's just too early for that to happen. But there are people in the Senate and in the Congress, very, very few, and certainly none on the record yet, who are aghast at what's going on right now. And that has to be comforting. They were in Trump 1. I spoke to Republican members of the Senate and Congress off the record on background who said, God, I can't believe this is where we are. I can't believe we're doing this. Yet they went on and enabled him. I think the fear of that man will shrink. I think the fear of Musk, even though there's all that money there and the threats of primaries and other candidates, et cetera, I think that will dissipate too. But it's not going to happen yet. It's not going to happen soon. That it doesn't happen typically with presidents until really after the midterms.
Did you see the picture, the Time magazine picture of Elon Musk sitting behind the Resolute desk?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
crazy.
yeah, that is, to me, I mean, that says all you need to know.
Yeah.
It really, and that the other great thing about that is whoever put that cover together, there's probably nothing in the last 2 weeks that has made Donald Trump seethe as much as seeing that picture. So it does serve a purpose, and it may take a second to resonate, but it does definitely serve a purpose.
And Ren writes, thank you for the $10 contribution to the show, Ren. Why does Musk get to fire people? Is he everyone's boss? She says no.
No, but
Crazy.
money is the boss in Washington right now with the people that are there. You have billionaires in the cabinet. You have a billionaire who has a non-cabinet position who's sort of running the Department of Government Efficiency, which didn't exist before. And you have his threats of primary that are being shared every single time there's disagreement. It is dictatorial at every level, and money dictates so much of our politics right now. It is the poison, and he has the most poison.
Yeah, it's really scary. Looking at some of the chats and comments, one person saying the Republicans aren't scared; they're the ones enabling all of this. So
Yeah, no, that's true.
yeah.
I have no argument with that at all. I mean, that is absolutely true. They are enabling, they have enabled, and they got this guy to where he is out of fear of their own jobs.
Yep.
And it continues. It continues with Bill Cassidy supporting Bobby Kennedy for Health and Human Services because
Yes.
he's afraid of a primary in Louisiana next year where a Republican will certainly win that race. But Bill Cassidy is a doctor, and Bill Cassidy should know better
Right.
and doesn't, because they fear, because they like the power. And there's nothing that you can do in the human nature side of it. There are very few of them in Washington that do things while knowing they're going to risk their power. I got to say that the more you see the cowards in Congress, the spineless people who refuse to stand up to Trump, the greater appreciation it gives me for someone like Gerald Ford, who knew that pardoning Nixon would heal the country, whether you agreed with the pardon at the time or not. And most people I know didn't at the time, but he knew that it would cost him the election. He knew that he wouldn't win re-election as president by doing that. And that's the most glaring example of somebody who doesn't care about the job as much as the country. Now, you may disagree with what he did about the country, but he says that he did it, and the people around him who bore witness to the character of Jerry Ford said that he did it for that reason, and he knew that it would be a death wish on his presidency, and it was. I mean, he was, a largely ineffective president, and he lost to Jimmy Carter, who came out of nowhere. So, and I think Jimmy Carter maintained a friendship with him based on the courage he showed in doing that as well.
There's a meeting that happened today between Trump and the leader of Japan, Prime Minister Ishiba. They held a joint news conference at the White House, and Trump said that Japan is now committed to increasing defense spending by 2027. And I guess that means he talked him into buying a bunch of American weaponry.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that it's strong arming, which by the way, Trump didn't invent strong arming from an American president. I mean, it's been done for a very long time even with our allies like that. But I in the context of what we're living through right now in this country, all of it seems important and all of it seems to matter much more so than does or than would have appeared to previous to this. So and look, I'm looking at it's the first I've seen of the Trump White House, of the Oval Office, since he's got McKinley up on the upper left there, and then the other presidents he's heard of. So but it's really truly, I think that everything has to be paid close attention to now, because none of it matters in the same way an Oval visit with a Japanese minister would have mattered before.
I'm noticing that stories that before would have taken front and center, would have been my lead, are now shuffled to the bottom of a newscast because of the most outrageous things happening. Like the things that used to be important, we don't even have time for that anymore because of the craziness. And I haven't been on the air with you since the whole Mara Gaza situation, and we're going to relocate 2 million
Yeah.
Palestinians permanently and take over the Gaza area. I guess build Trump Tower Gaza, turn it into the Mediterranean Riviera of the Middle East.
Yeah, the Riviera of the Middle East. And as if Riviera resonates with any of the voters that brought Donald Trump to the White House. That's the thing, that there's such a disconnect. Donald Trump is an elitist. He's somebody who has money, who wants to only be around rich white people and talk about rich white things. But the people that sent him to Washington, and who are complaining about eggs while buying $300 MAGA sweatshirts a moment earlier, they don't know what the Riviera is. He's not speaking to them. He doesn't really care about them. And we know that. We know that this was just a way to get power and a way to exercise that power in a dictatorial way. He even said it. I mean, he didn't fool anyone. I think that the Gaza thing is, we don't have land wars. I mean, from the American standpoint and from an allied standpoint, we are aghast at Russia going into Ukraine. But what does he want to do? He wants to conquer. He wants to conquer land. He wants to get Canada. He wants to get Greenland. He wants to get the Gulf of America. He is so hell bent on geography now, not just ideology. And it's these are all things that need to be paid attention to. And now Gaza and the Riviera of the peninsula is something that's super important to him all of a sudden. Even his White House tried to walk it back a little bit, but it was already out there in the ether, and it has people embracing it in Israel as well.
Do you see the picture of his chief of staff and the look on her face when he said it at a press conference? Like, she couldn't believe he was talking about raising the Gaza Strip area and building a resort there. Crazy.
Well, that's what happens to people who go to work. I mean, Susie Wiles, we can think whatever we want of Susie Wiles. She is not and did not wake up, drinking MAGA juice before she met Donald Trump. She is not crazy. She is, I think there's a bit of crazy to anyone who attaches themselves to this man. I think part of it is unforgivable. But I say that objectively. I don't say that subjectively, which is hard to believe. I think what he does is we in the media have proven his lies. We have proven that he doesn't like what we say, and his trying to destroy what we do, which is so important when done right. So but Susie Wiles, like so many people before her who've gotten into his orbit and had to hear what he said. You remember those COVID press conferences where even, what was her name? Deborah. The other, there was another doctor who seemed to be more in line of his skepticism of COVID.
One with the pretty scarves.
Well, yeah, and she would roll her eyes at times. She would be aghast at some of the things he said, and people would not show up to those press conferences because they didn't want to associate themselves with the free association that he goes through out there, almost as a soliloquy. So it doesn't surprise me. And the more that these people are around him, and we've seen it in the past, that the more they can't endure. Stephen Mnuchin, who was the Treasury Secretary, lasted 4 years with Donald Trump. It's amazing. He must not have, opened his eyes once in 4 years.
Speaking of Treasury, and this is another one of those stories that gets thumped to the bottom when it should be front and center. The new Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, wants to bypass the Fed to lower interest rates. Well, wait a minute. Who's in charge of interest rates? I guess I heard Donald Trump was very upset at the last Fed meeting. They didn't do what he thought they should be doing. And so now the Treasury Secretary is trying to stick his fingers in the pie to affect interest rates in America.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing. This is more of the dictatorial approach to politics. Let's go through the normal constructs, ineffective, inefficient sometimes, broken, in need of attention, not all of them, some of them extraordinary, but let's go around them in order to do whatever it is we want to do, as if they had a mandate, which they did not. They did not have a political or electoral mandate. They won by fewer than they did last time. They got fewer votes than Trump, with all his votes, got 13 million, I think, fewer than Biden did in 2020. This was not a mandate, and this was not a license to be a dictator. But the power of people not voting in Senate races and people not voting in congressional races, it shows you what happens. Is now he's got all the arms of power, and he can, at least for a little bit, do whatever it is he wants.
Are there any stories? I asked you this last week. Any stories that stuck out to you this week that I didn't present to you? And I know last week you were talking about keeping your eye on Democratic leadership and what type of resistance that they were mounting. Have you seen any movement in that regard?
No, I mean, I think they kept votes open and they kept the floor open, the Democrats. All ceremonial stuff. They can't do much more. I mean, I don't think we can be frustrated, but we can't say that there's anything that they're not doing that they ought to be doing yet, because they just don't have the power. The way the rules of the Senate work, you can only do so much. But I think delaying as much as they can, because what delaying does is it gets people who are just passive about this stuff to pay a little bit of attention and see what's going on. And then when you have a fighter in the fight, then you can get, you can become a little more interested. But no, I think that the story is that they're actually seeming to stick together. John Fetterman of Pennsylvania seems to be a little bit off on his own, as he tends to be, which is okay. I mean, there have been senators who've been off on their own. Most of them come home and stick with the team when they're up against the wall. One of the sort of, I think, exceptional things about what Nancy Pelosi did when she was Speaker of the House, forgetting what you think of Nancy Pelosi or what you thought legislatively that she did, in the face of Trump, she was able to keep everybody together. It's herding cats a lot. Democrats come from lots of different places, and they fight in different ways, and they have different issues, and they have different fears and different things areas in which they're strong. And she was able to do that. If the leadership in the House and Senate is able to do that, even if it means invoking God a little more than they're comfortable doing, I think that will help in whatever mounted and organized fight against can be. But you should keep your expectations low, not because of the people involved, but because of the numbers and the rules.
Time for Michael Shure's 48 seconds of sports. And I saw that we have a comment from Luis, who says, Michael, are the Rangers in danger of being shipped to Guantanamo for their crimes against hockey? There are only 3 points north of the basement.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, Luis. This is 48 seconds of sports TM. The Rangers, and I think Albert, if he's been watching, they've been lackluster. They haven't seemed to have pop. They just made a trade last week. They got JT Miller, a player I actually don't like very well, but he's very good. I don't like the guy that much, but he should make a difference. I could see them missing the playoffs. It's hard to imagine a Peter Laviolette team missing the playoffs. It's hard to imagine the best goalie, maybe top 3 goalies in hockey, missing the playoffs. But they just have not shown very much. They came back against Boston the other night. Maybe that'll light a spark. But yeah, I get what you're saying, Luis. And this has been 48 seconds of sports.
Can I throw a sports story in there? Trump's going to the Super Bowl this weekend. Someone told me that we should boycott the Super Bowl because Trump is going to be there, so we should all just look away.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, how you're going to tell football fans or Chiefs and Eagles fans not to watch the Super Bowl because of Trump? I think that you can turn it off when he's introduced, because people at the Super Bowl who paid amazing amounts of money for tickets are likely going to be the people that stand up and cheer for the commander in chief. And that's kind of not what we are hoping to see. But yeah, look, if you really love football, just because he's there are ways to avoid seeing him, but watch the game. It's the end of football season, and then you don't get it again until August. He's going to be on the TV later, and he's going to be appearing in lots of places. He's the president, and unfortunately, you just have to kind of bite your tongue. You don't have to bite your tongue. You can just. But I would proceed and watch football, because most of that game is a distraction from everything else he's doing.
Absolutely. Michael Shure, thank you for coming by the show and hanging out with me.
All right. Thanks, guys. Love being here. Thanks to everyone in the comments. Talk to you later. All right.
Great weekend.
Hi, it's
Bye.
Mark again. I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped. And please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.